Life is complicated and uncertain and gorgeous with some things we can count on. It has seasons of struggle and seasons of delight, and sometimes the two blow in and bloom simultaneously. Like now, maybe always. And here we are together, breathing together, questing together, holding each other through it all. Sinking our roots down into what grounds us, reaching toward the sun, flowering into this season, all of whose traditions witness to life more abundant. Let us open our hearts to the abundance of creation that surrounds and sustains us. Oops. Well, good morning and welcome. I am Jan Chippendale. I am a member of the congregation and the service leader this morning. And for many, this is a special day. For those who celebrate Easter, this day carries a message of everlasting love and hope. And we are celebrating Earth Day, honoring the gifts of the earth and our responsibility to be good stewards of those gifts. And I believe this is also the last day of Passover. So if this is a day that has special meaning for you, may it bring you joy and hope and a sense of gratitude and connection with whatever you hold most dear. And whatever brings you here to be with us today, it's always good to be in community, and we're very glad that you're here. So welcome to all. I am very happy to welcome back Barbara Hurd today. Barbara is a widely published and award-winning author who writes mostly about the natural world, and we have been fortunate to have her with us several times, and she will be offering the message today. So thank you for being here. It's always nice to have you here. I have a reading to share with you this morning. This is by Reverend Gary Kowalski. I have preached many eulogies in my time, most of them heartfelt. One of the most difficult I ever delivered, but one of the most healing, was for my own grandfather. Because I loved him deeply, it was painful to say goodbye. I had to stop and collect myself at several points in order to make it through the service. But the tears were also mysteriously transforming. It was cathartic to put my thoughts and feelings into words. Strange to say, I experienced something like euphoria. Along with the sorrow, I felt an unspeakable gladness for the life we had shared. A short while before he died, my grandfather gave me a folder of ruminations he had accumulated over the decades. Most all high moments in life, he wrote, whether of sorrow or happiness, are generally embroidered with tears. Growing older has helped me appreciate the simple truth in that. I cry more easily now than when I was younger, at silly movies, over poems, at funerals and weddings. I get a lump in my throat for happy endings as well as sad ones. What I've come to realize is that the two are often synonymous. Like rain and rainbows, they are twin aspects of a single reality. It is often in the midst of weeping that we glimpse life's unquenchable beauty. It is in our farewells, however wrenching, that we come closest to sensing an essence that overcomes separation and outlasts time. And that, it seems to me, is part of what we celebrate at Easter. For just as the cross is a symbol of both death and birth, tears are not merely a response to tragedy. They are also the waters of life.
Good morning. I want to thank you, first of all, for inviting me back again. Can you hear me okay? I'm always pleased to visit this community. It seems to me a remarkable, you do a remarkable job of kind of multidisciplinary and multi-generational conversations, which I think are the only kinds of conversations finally that will make a difference. That kind of conversation is related to the idea I'd like us to consider this morning. The title of this talk is Resurrecting Our Elders. And mostly I think about that as acknowledging our elders. I'm going to tell you about two elders in my life, and in a few minutes, I'm going to ask you all about elders in your life that you might want to offer gratitude for. So maybe while I'm talking, you can also be thinking about who those people or person, who that might be. And I want to emphasize that whoever that elder might be, and whether they're dead or alive, their way of touching your life might have been very direct, as in conversations or in classrooms, or very indirect, coming from books, for example, or podcasts or music. However that happens, think of a person who spoke to you as no one else had when you were 5 or 40 or 60 or 80, a person who somehow magnified your own spirit. I think that experience can feel like a profound recognition, the sense of having been deeply seen. Something in that other person or their work resonates with something in you that might never have been expressed. These are the people whom the writer Lauren Isley calls your hidden teacher. Whatever the form of that contact, you feel moved. Your life on some deep level has been touched. In his small treasure of a book called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, isn't that a great title? John Koenig makes up a definition for a word that he's also made up. The word is maledro. The definition he provides is this, quote, a feeling of resonant connection with an author or artist who can get inside your head and leave behind morsels of their experience, like little piles of stones left by hikers that mark a hidden path through unfamiliar territory, end quote. Maledro describes so beautifully my experience of reading Rachel Carson's work over the last 50 years or so. She was, as I'm sure many of you know, a scientist whose work in the early 1960s revolutionized evolutionary or environmental thinking. When I'm out walking or I'm trying to write passages about the natural world, I feel those piled up morsels she has left in my mind, those trail markers that have guided my search, like lodestars somehow dropped in among the million synapses of a buzzing brain. Something inside me wakes up a little more, and I feel ready to see the world a little differently. I just turned 76, and at this point in my life, I'm interested in how we survey our pasts, not just with nostalgia, but with curiosity about who in our lives might have nudged us, perhaps more than we knew at the time, along a path that ultimately became ours. And further, I'm interested now in how we can acknowledge those people who made a difference. How can we pay tribute to those who have, if we stick with this metaphor, dropped trail markers, those maledros, on our paths? There are many such ways, of course, and one of them is to write a letter. And so that's what I, a little more than a year ago, decided to do. I decided I would write to Rachel Carson. When my youngest granddaughter asked why on earth I was writing a letter to a dead person, I told her I'm trying to resurrect her within my own life, to see her influence on me, that I'm trying to think about what I would say to her now if she were alive, that I'm trying to take Carson's sensibility, which was so way ahead of her time, and imagine it into the present, bringing it forward, weaving it into this world to see if it changes how I think about rising seas, pesticides, poisonings, any of the many crises affecting our planet these days that she worked so hard to protect. And that I'm trying to find ways to pay tribute to her for the work she did on both a global scale and a personal one. So a year later, my attempt to write Rachel Carson a letter has turned into a whole series of letters. And I'm going to read just part of one this morning. And I should tell you before I start reading this one, I wrote this last summer. I was in Maine. I'd rented a little cabin that was across the water from where Rachel Carson's summer cottage is on Southport Island. And I'd gone there for my own personal writing retreat to think about Rachel Carson. The letter is long, so I'm just pulling chunks out of it. So it may come across as a little choppy. Maybe you can piece things together, though. Dear Rachel, earlier this morning, while the wind howled and rain hammered the roof, I'd been sitting at the cabin's only table, sipping tea and idly thumbing through Always Rachel, when I was stopped by a note in the margin on page 329, quote, by Lauren Isley, first published in 1957. The book, Always Rachel, is a thick collection of letters. that you and your friend Dorothy exchanged over the last dozen years of your life. She had written this particular letter to you on January 13th, 1961, while she was on a train headed back to New England after visiting you in Silver Spring, Maryland. In the letter, Dorothy notes that she's been reading Lauren Isley's The Immense Journey. That's why the marginal note is there. And promises to send you certain pages, though she guesses you already know what she means by the magical suspension of time that Isley invokes. Oh, I thought the two of you, too, had been moved, as I have been so many times, by Isley's ability to raise brooding about Marvel to an art. I love such moments when that thread among simpatico readers is lightly twanged and I feel in good company. I'm going to skip a section that describes my leaving the cabin and then going down to the water's edge. There were some tide pools down there, and there was a storm, and so it was a pretty crazy thing to be sitting next to for a while. I was especially thinking about the creatures that live in those tidal zones and what do they do when a storm comes up like that? Such wave pounding means that in addition to finding food and reproducing, every living thing on this edge has a third major job to do, figuring out how to survive the twice daily force of tides, especially when those tides are roiled by storms. Though I couldn't see them in the uproar, I knew, because of you, what certain creatures in that whipped up zone had done in preparation. They'd tightened, closed, and upped anything that keeps them from being sucked out to sea or bashed against the coast. The sea urchin, for example, had contracted its tube feet, whose suctioning strength, augmented by a kind of adhesive, keeps it fastened to the rocks. The sea anemone's whole bottom had suction cupped itself to the rocks. From their bellies, the periwinkles had exuded a sticky mucus that keeps them well fastened to stone. The kelps hold fast. Isn't that a great word? Hold fast. Just love that word. The kelps hold fast, a snarl of underwater fibers grasped whatever substrate is available. Mussels tightened their byssal threads and lashed themselves to the rocks. The storm had been forecast as brief, but until it passed, those creatures were holding on with all they had. Me, I'm not so sure. Facing personal turmoil or local upsets or the recent effects of the 2024 election and sudden guillotine of global agreements, how do we hold on when it's not the body, but the soul, if I might use that word, that feels at the risk of being torn away, dangerously upheavaled? Nothing in our physical bodies constitutes a holdfast or secretes an adhesive or supersuctions ourselves in place. We've evolved from such coping mechanisms and developed other means of keeping ourselves from being swept away by the changing tides. We have religion, community bonds, historical perspectives, allegiances to this or that. For me, there is family and friends, a backyard garden, and a winding trail beyond my home. There is a favorite C.J. Mall painting of tree roots. There is Schubert's Impromptu in G flat. And there are certain passages of yours. Speaking of Beethoven, for example, you wrote, this is quoted, "Only when I have felt myself so deeply moved, so possessed by something outside myself, can I feel that inner confidence that what I am doing is right." The world's a mess these days, but there are still things to be grateful for. Thank you, Dorothy said in another letter to you dated 1961, for making me know and understand the sea, which had been such a part of my being for so long, and yet it took you to reveal it to me. Yes, I say, me too. And for helping me hear the pleasure in birdsong and breaking waves, tidal slosh and gull cry, the familiar coastal sounds that make those of us who delight in them sometimes feel like kin. And for reminding me that among the dangerous complicities we're all part of, sustaining sanctuaries do remain, physical and spiritual places, including deep friendships and the wisdom of elders, where we can go to recenter ourselves. It seems I've begun in these letters to resurrect you, not just as Miss Carson, the groundbreaking environmentalist, but as Rachel, part of my lineage. We know food webs and migration routes are intricately entangled, so too perhaps are the webs that nourish our human sensibilities. For both of us, the salt of intimacy, waves of ceaseless flux. We've stuck our toes in the same waters, sidled up to the same writers, not just Lauren Isley, but also Charles Darwin, Henry Beston. Your list of literary heroes is all tangled up with mine. In the same letter, Dorothy wishes that you'd been there on that train with her, that she would have then she would have tried to form the words right there, right then, to describe the impact of Isley's words. And failing that, she would have simply leaned into you and said softly, "Listen to this." It's what some of us do with certain folks, dead or alive. "Listen to this," we whisper. And yes, and listen to this, we seem to hear back. We trust that certain words will strike similar chords, that appreciation will resonate and strengthen a sense of kinship. Those kin might be long dead, but in Isley's magical suspension of time, they're also right here, right now. Call such recognitions affinities, call them the loosely convened. Each living thing is bound to its world by many threads, you said. You weren't referring to humans, but those threads do include us. And though heaven knows most of us need an occasional influx of the different and new, in times of turmoil, certain whispered words of those who've come before can help keep us balanced and steady. Our restless orbits, sometimes wobbly and slowed, sometimes twined, intersect in ways we might never understand. The mystery of shared moorings and common anchors amid chaos especially takes on a subtle glint. The dimly lit feels companionable, a little less dim. For this, Rachel, I thank you. Barbara. Before I read the letter I wrote to another elder, I'd like to tell you about an encounter I had years ago, and I was lucky enough to host another elder, the poet Lucille Clifton, in my living room. There were a few other local writers there, and she sat on my lumpy sofa for a couple of hours and talked about a lot of different things related to life and work. But the thing I remember most was this. When you write poems, she said, when you talk to others about poems, when you read them and write about them, even just in the privacy of your own kitchen, you are doing something essential in a culture that doesn't much value the arts. You are, she said, feeding the country's creative spirit. Writing letters of gratitude, I believe, does something similar. Invisibly, without fanfare, without hope of recognition or even response, when we write letters of gratitude, we are still helping to keep alive something without which no country can survive. It's moral commitment to generosity, to compassion, and to the legacies of those who have been our hidden teachers. By paying tribute, privately or publicly, I believe we are contributing a vital and subversive energy to parts of our cultures in which something matters more than money or power or winning. We are keeping the spirit of giving alive and moving in the world. Many of our elders have no need for resurrection because they're alive and among us still doing the good work that can move us to offer gratitude. So it is with another one of my heroes. Betty Hedidian. I had hoped she would be here today, but regardless, this is still one of her communities. And so this is my letter of tribute to her. Dear Betty, you know, when I was writing this, I pictured her right there. I think I'm going to address the chair maybe at the piano. Dear Betty, on top of my piano at home sits a stack of books I accumulated during the 5 or 6 years you were my piano teacher more than 10 years ago. Sometimes I thumb through them and remember my struggles to move my fingers the way you move yours, to hear what you hear, to play the music as you do, almost as if you were breathing it in and out. It was a dream of mine to play at least decently, a dream that didn't exactly die under your tutelage, but became a different dream because I came to understand that what you were teaching me had to do with way more than playing beautiful sonatas. The penciled markings in those books, they feel to me now like more than reminders to pick up the tempo or press down the pedal, but like markers on some trail you helped forge in my mind, maledros, so to speak. You helped me see how sometimes reading the music means reading the music, trying to put Mozart's genius into the air, and that sometimes reading the music can mean something more. Your reminders were literal, but the poet in me often heard them as metaphors for how to live a meaningful life. Things happen in the silence, you said. Listen to it. There is gentle dissonance, and there is intense dissonance, you said. Listen to them differently. You taught me how music can move into the body. Your notes are scribbled all through my workups. Float your elbows, sit up straight, relax your shoulders. Play, you reminded me, as if your ear were the creator. One of my favorites, the tonal world, you said, is what the imagination creates. I'm going to read that one again. The tonal world, you said, is what the imagination creates. Imagine risk. Meander more, enjoy the luxurious wandering. Listen, you said, playing a few measures of some piece I was bumbling through. It's as if you've been on one path and then a single note enters and part of you keeps going and the other stays right there, right on that G flat. Press firmly. You have to listen to both. I doubt that you know, Betty, how that wisdom still helps me balance the tension between my wish to stay home in half hermit mode and my wish to be part of a larger community. Part of me ventures out and a part of me curls up in front of my fireplace. Listen, you said, to both. You taught me to hear our stories as solos because, yes, our individuality matters, but you wouldn't stop there. Listen orchestrally, you told me, over and over. But it took me years to understand how 3 strands of music can live within one fugal work, each of them going about their own acoustical lives, the pluralities of which add up to a marvel. And isn't that, after all, what it is for all of us in our myriad diversities to live here together on this one planet? Isn't that also a marvel? You taught me, too, about the value of practice, not just to do the drills and fine-tune the timing, but to have a practice, something one begins to inhabit. It's getting there, it's coming along, you told me over and over again. On one level, I know that you were encouraging me to keep at it, to not give up. But I also hear that phrase now, especially in these chaotic times, as a reminder to keep returning to what we love, to trust in the practicing of our values, to understand that staying devoted to the long arc of progress might be more enduringly worthwhile than any raucous overnight success. How many of our conversations veered from Beethoven to values, from Schubert to schools, to books and the importance of commitment, to the way music can open a tight fist and a closed mind. I remember one spring morning when we sat side by side at your piano and I was playing the second movement of a Mozart sonata. I played it expressively, building crescendos and arriving secretly very pleased at the top of a run. Hear me, I thought, sitting up taller, aware of you sitting silently beside me. Hear how well I'm doing here. I was pumped up and feeling triumphant. When I finished, you leaned over and pointed to those exact measures on the score and said, ease off here. You're over-communicating. Do you doubt Mozart's ability to make something beautiful? Let the music play itself. Sound familiar, Jean? It was yet another lesson in humility. Charles Darwin, whose work changed the world, was brilliant and wholly committed to science, but he suffered from various physical ailments almost all his life. Perhaps in explanation, he lamented on his deathbed that, quote, "If I had my life to live over again, I would have made it a rule to read some poetry and listen to some music at least once a week." He considered music and poetry to be the greatest nourishers of the empathic imagination, and saw too late how, this is quoting from his autobiography, the loss of these tastes is a loss of happiness. I wish Darwin could have sat next to you for a while, learned a few things about what it means to be moved by the marvels of music. Maybe he would have died a happier man. I am forever grateful that I, with my mediocre skills, got to sit next to you week after week, and that I came finally to understand what I was really doing was soaking you up. Not just your instructions about tempo and staccatos, but about what one woman's life can look like. Yours, so full of passion and the drive to teach, the celebration of beauty, the hard work of having a practice, your hands on a piano, those hours of musical genius you coaxed from the keys. When best-selling writer and botanist Robin Wall Kimmerer was asked by a fan who felt only despair in these demoralizing times, "But what on earth can one person possibly do?" Kimmerer looked at her and answered, "Well, what is your gift?" At age 98, questions of mortality must circle around you now and then. I hope you know that for thousands of us, you have done magnificently what Kimmerer urges each of us to do. You have offered your gift, and the world has been made better for that. Thank you. So, I'd like to open this conversation up for any questions, or perhaps for anyone who wants to tell us about an elder that you feel maybe you might want to offer gratitude to someday.
I want to thank you for that wonderful letter. That's great. Betty is also a good friend of mine, and I know she is concerned about what she can give to the world and if she's done enough. And
that would be Betty to wonder.
Yes. And the ending of your letter brings tears to my eyes, and I know will to her. The other thing that I thought was during COVID, I got to sit while her kids came in and taped their recital, which she sent out to all their parents because they couldn't be it as a group. And I was helping her just with the audio part or the computer part or whatever, which I barely have skills for, but I was able to help do that. And I sat there with a notebook and wrote down all her comments to the students, and they were profound, just like what you said. It was just wonderful to write down these things that not only spoke to their music but their lives. And then I guess the other thing that I would say is that Betty helps me to become an adult musician. I teach kids, but I would not be able to express myself musically as much as I have through her good wisdom. So thank you for that.
Thank you all.
For those who came before us, we offer gratitude and thanks. May their memories be a blessing. May we feel surrounded by their love as we go forth from this time and place, and let us be inspired by their courage, their wisdom, and their dreams. Let us honor them by doing the work of living boldly, loving mightily, and creating heaven on earth. Amen and blessed be. You're welcome to stay for refreshments and conversation. Go in peace.